Hello and welcome. I am Scrabberlock, and this is City of Heroes with Liberty Lass playing on the newly officially allowed homecoming server Everlasting. And we've got a new contact, Tony Cord, who's in Atlas Park. So let's go ahead and talk to him. I can't remember what exactly missions he gives you, so we'll see. We might come back here and do the police scanner. Um, I haven't done that because those are pretty generic missions, and I thought we'd do some of the traditional contacts, but I don't remember what Tony Cord has for us, so let's just take a look and we'll see. By the way, I do want to point out this character has a cape. My original costume for her did not, because in the original launch of the game, there were no capes. That came out in issue 1 or 2. So the Clockworks are scavenging in King's Row, or go to the King's Row Security Chief, right? Well, we may as well do that because for those of you who may be new, the security chiefs exist in all of the non-hazard zones, and they are basically there to like help you learn the zone. And what happens with the contacts once you get to a new zone is pretty much all the contacts are going to keep offering you the mission until you do it. So I usually just do it to get it out of the way. When we get to the higher levels, 20, 25, 30, where the security chief starts asking you to like beat up 20 or 30 or 40 enemies, I just auto-complete those because I don't find them to be any fun. But usually at this level, it's usually kind of doing around your level number of enemies plus or minus a few. And so presumably he won't ask us to do too many. Yeah, 10 skulls. It's not horrible. Let's see, there are usually some skulls by the hospital, which is over there. I don't know, they might be too high level for us. Let's just take a look. So one of the problems, and the game is very indiscriminate about this in the open zones, but much better about it in the, oh man, these guys are purple, so yeah, that's not going to work. It's much better about it in the areas that are, the instance missions where everything is scaled to your level. Yeah, in the open zones, they're perfectly willing to give you a level 5 character a mission to go into like the level 10 area, and um, you have no chance at it, right? Or they'll give you a mission where you only like there are however many zones in this area of the city, what districts or whatever you want to call it, and only one of the districts has viable enemies of your level. And you know the reason they do that, there is a reason. The reason they do that is because what they were trying to do when the game launched was get you to team up, right? So the idea was if there's a group of people together, a group of heroes could take on some oranges and reds, and they'd probably be okay because there were several of them, right? So the controller would lock all these guys down, and the tanker would taunt them, and the blaster would blast them, and they'd be taken out pretty quickly without a lot of risk. Even if they're orange or red, the defender buffs you so that you can hit the orange, red, and yellow guys, and so on and so forth. So that was the original logic behind doing this. One of the issues eventually became, of course, that this is all tutorial and training, but a lot of us players have already done this stuff, so I don't really need to learn the zones of Atlas Park or Kings Row or any of these other places. I don't need to learn how to do LFG, look for group. I don't need to learn how to use the team interface, right? Because I've done it already. And I always used to say, and I've mentioned this in my other videos, that it would have been probably a really good design decision for the developers at some point, eventually, to set an algorithm where you could basically opt out of all this stuff so that you'd never see the security chief missions because they're kind of useless once you know the game. And I remember posting on the boards and saying give us an option, and statesmen coming on and saying, well, but then people could mistakenly click the option and we don't want players to be confused. I said, all right, how about this? Once you get to level 50 with one character, you can turn that option on, that you don't see these missions anymore. They never really responded, that I recall, and obviously they've never done it. But I always felt like once you hit level 50, you really shouldn't get the tutorial missions. I always remember being laughing at them because of the idea that, and I'll show you, this looks like a story arc here. Laughing at them saying, like, you guys give the tutorial missions to people who are playing Keldians, and you can only play a Keldian after you've gotten to level 51. So, like, self-evidently, somebody playing a Keldian does not need help in how to basically play the game because they've already got to level 50. So why don't you at least turn it off for the Keldians? They never really did. All right, so this break up the clockwork and skulls. This looks like it might be a story arc. Is it? Apparently not. So it looks like it's just a story arc-like mission. So those blue titles are usually story arc names, and they tell you ahead of time that you're on a story arc. And one of the things that I like about Homecoming, and I think it was already built into the stuff that was in the server from the private server that Leandro was running, that Homecoming was derived from. See my Stalker videos in the early part of the Stalker videos, and when I first got onto Rebirth, for the story of Homecoming and where it came from, and where the code came from and all that. You can find that stuff on the internet as well. But the story arc parts, right? The different chapters in Homecoming, they're numbered, and on the Rebirth server, because I guess they weren't in the live game, they're not numbered. And so sometimes it can be hard. You can tell that you're on a story arc. I can tell that we're not. If you're on a story arc, there's like a little book that shows up here as an icon, so it tells you you're on a story arc. But in here on Homecoming, and we'll see it as we get into some of the other arcs, they actually offer it to you with those little blue words. And so, as you've seen, the contacts will offer you two options, right? And it's good that we have endurance here, because these guys drain your endurance when they hit you. What I like about it is you can tell from the blue text which of the options that you're looking at is going to lead you into that first story arc part. And once you're on the story arc, you kind of don't need to know that much, although it's kind of nice to know like which parts you're on. But the most important thing to me is to know which of the two missions that I'm being offered are story arc missions. And sometimes when you're on the arc, it'll still keep offering you two missions. And if you go watch some of my Rebirth stuff, when I was like maybe reading too quickly or just forgot what the next mission was supposed to be in the arc, I would get on an arc and then I would take like 2 or 3 missions from that contact that were the non-arc generic missions, because you couldn't necessarily tell. And I find that sort of frustrating, and I like that I'm pretty sure in Homecoming you can always tell which of the 2 missions you're being offered is an actual story arc. We're now 1 bead away from hitting level 7, and we will get a couple more slots. Oh no, level 6, sorry, I misread that. I was looking out the top of my progressive lens eyeglasses, which I've had for over a year now, so I shouldn't be messing that up. But the 5 looked like a 6 to me from where I'm sitting. These guys are mostly yellow cons. This is another thing that happened a lot in the launch game, which is that the missions are your level, right? This is a level 5 mission. But there is a random possibility that the enemy spawns could be within 2 levels of you, and generically mostly within 1 level of you. So there's a variety of spawns in any mission, and some of them give you +0 to the mission. Some will be +1 and some will be -1. And what happens, and again, I feel like they fixed this on Rebirth. I don't know if they fixed it in Homecoming, because these are different code bases. So I'm not sure at what point it got adjusted. But in the original game, when it first launched, there was a much higher percentage of +1 enemies in the lower level missions, and a much lower percentage of those enemies in the higher level missions. I remember when I first went through the game that I remember actually writing about this on the forums, because I'm one of the people who pushed for the difficulty setting that we now have, where you can set the mission on up to +2 and how many players you count as. At the time, they didn't have choices about arch-villains. That came later, after they invented elite bosses, which weren't originally in the game. And so I was one of the ones who advocated. I don't want to make it sound like I'm the one who got it done. Certainly not. But I was definitely one of the people who advocated for mission difficulty. And one of the reasons was that when you got to like 30th level, almost all the +1s disappeared from missions, and all my missions were against +0s. And so I was like, yeah, as a scrapper and at 40th level, +0s are absolutely zero challenge to you. And you can see that, heck, +0s aren't much of a challenge to me at level 5 as a brute, right? Now, there weren't any brutes in the game, but brutes and scrappers are pretty darn similar. And they have melee primary and a secondary that's some kind of a defense. And so, yeah, I mean, I was just running rampant through the missions, just crushing everything. And you guys know me, I like a challenge. I said, look, let me set the difficulty a little higher. I would like to face some +1s or +2s. You know, when I went into hazard zones, or when I went into, you know, cities, as I told in the one story in the previous episode, where I was talking about how I went in at level 26 to Independence Port, and I fought like a whole big giant spawn of orange cons, and I kicked their butts. I'm like, oh, I can do this. So I started preferentially going to regions of the zone I was in that had higher level enemies, because that was giving me a challenge when I was outdoors, but you couldn't do that indoors. And so I said, look, you guys allow me in the game to pick how hard the enemies are by choosing which zone to go into, etc. Outdoors, why can't I also pick it indoors? Eventually, they did do it. Alright, so this guy likes to fight Clockworks, discourage the Clockworks scavenging Kings Row. That's a street mission. Or there's an abandoned storage place. Yeah, let's go to the abandoned storage place. One of the other things that I noticed that they have done... Hang on, I messed up my mouse here. Let's see if this works. No. Okay, that's better. One of the things I noticed that they have done is... and I noticed this on Rebirth as well. There are some timed missions, but they've dramatically reduced. The frequency of them is much lower than it was in the launch. Timed missions were roughly a third of the missions that you got. And what always drove me nuts is you almost never knew, the context almost never told you it was a timed mission. There might be some hints in the mission text. Oh shoot, what am I doing? I don't mean to buy. I meant to sell. I don't have anything to sell. Well, that was stupid, but that's all right. We don't have to worry about influence. I've got 171 million on Silver Phoenix if we need it. So yeah, the contact would just tell you. This is another auto power, fast healing, and mind over body is a toggle. As much as I'd rather get the auto power, I think we need the toggle. So toggles, you turn it on, it's like set it and forget it, and then it just runs. And you'll see that when we get it on, we have 22% now. Smashing and lethal resistance, and 20% psionic, which is quite nice. We're level 6, and we got a mission to go to. So back to the timed missions. You would talk to the contact, you take the mission, and it would say you have 45 minutes. And the original time missions were generally 30 to 45 minutes when the game first came out. And this would be absolutely frustrating because sometimes you wouldn't realize it was a timed mission, and then you're like, oh my gosh, like 30 minutes. Well, wait a minute, I don't actually have 30 minutes right now, and I only have about 15 minutes, and I was going to just take this mission and then log off and do it later, and you can't. Oh boy. And you can't because the uh, it's timed. And what would happen is if you logged off, the timer would keep counting, and when you log back in, you failed the mission. And that was really frustrating. Now, the reality with City of Heroes is I think even at launch, when you failed the mission, it just gave it back to you. So it's not like it was going to like make it so that you couldn't complete a story arc or something. But it was very frustrating as a player. And I remember one time we were in we were there was a blaster in our group. A lot of blasters. It was City of Blasters back then. There was the one woman who was a blaster. She was like, hey, she got a time mission. And she's like, guys, I need help. So she'd gone in. It was fifth column, and she'd gone in to fight them, and they were just owning her butt. What happened with a lot of blasters is they were fine against melee enemies in low levels, but the range enemies were just kicking their butts because they had no defenses. And they couldn't do enough damage fast enough with just like training enhancements and 2 or 3 powers. And so we were all like 8th level or something, and she gets this like 45-minute mission, and we all joined up. And the problem that we didn't realize was going to happen, we shouldn't have formed a big group. So what happened is we formed a big group, but now the mission was scaled for all of us. And so we went in there, and there's like these spawns of like 2 bosses and 3 lieutenants and like 8 minions because there were 8 of us on the team. And it was taking us forever to clean out these spawns. And it was one of these missions that was like 3 or 4 office building levels. It just kept going and going. It was room after room that was just stuffed. And we had to do these pulls because, like, for instance, as a scrapper, I couldn't go in there and attack those guys because I didn't have range defense yet, I don't think. And so that made it very difficult for me, and I kept getting pounded, right, by their attacks. And I don't think we had a tanker. I think the woman, I had a tanker alt, but I was playing my scrapper, and the woman who was the blaster was the other alt, the person who had an alt as a tanker. And so we had no tanker, and we were just getting pounded and pounded and pounded. And at one point I finally said, hey, do you want me to go get Liberty Lass, who was, 5th level or something and was a tanker? And by the time I like got her and logged in and joined the group and everything, like we just ran out of time. And we were like frantically, people were face planting, we were rushing, we were frantically trying to help this woman finish her mission on time. And in the end, she failed it, and I think she had to come back like the next day with one other player, and they tried like duoing it, and they were like, oh, it was a lot easier because it was a smaller group. And so it was like her and the controller, I think. And with the controller locking people down and her blasting them, they were able to do it since they were only fighting spawns of like 4 guys. So yeah, the time missions ended up being a real bear. And again, they were so short. The time horizon was so short. And sometimes you would get these missions where you would get a regular non-timed mission. And at the end of the mission, you'd get a clue that would lead you to automatically take, with no option, a new timed mission. And I remember at one point I was working, I would be working at a job that started fairly late, so I'd get up in the morning, and they would like reboot the servers fairly early, and I'd get up at 6 in the morning, and I'd log in and play with one of the guys who was like in another country. And we had one of these things happen where it was like I only have like half an hour or something, and then I got to go to work, I got to get ready for work. And we did a mission or two. They were pretty quick, right? You can see these aren't that long. And then all of a sudden, I got a mission. Like my next mission was like it automatically started after completing the mission before it, and it was timed. And it was like I got 30 minutes. I'm like, I can't do that. I got to go to work. So yeah, I failed that mission, and I had to go back and I think I don't know if I had to do them both again, but yeah, I failed that mission and had to do it over again, right? And again, it's not that big of a deal that you have to do it over again, but it's super frustrating as a player And what I kept saying to them is, guys, this is all fine if you just make it so that the clock stops when I log out. Don't time it on real time. Time it on how long I'm in the game. If you just stop the clock when I log out, it's not a problem. Because then when I log back in, I'll log back in when I have time to do the time mission, and it'll be no issue at all. Um, but they never did that. I don't think. I don't remember now if it stops when you log out. It might. Um, but yeah, I remember so many times when I had to just let missions run out of time because I just couldn't do it. Now, one of the things they also did, because we had situations where, like, you'd have two players and they both need help with a mission and they both got time missions, and one guy's is going to run out while you're doing the other guy's. You say, well, don't everybody take missions. Well, sometimes you didn't realize that the way we would play in a group, like in my super group, is we would join up. There's like 5 of us or whatever. Everybody would split up. We'd go to our contacts. We'd each get a mission to put a mission on the board, right? And then whoever was team leader would cycle through the group, and each person would get a mission done, right? So we'd get 5 missions done, and each of us would get one of ours done and help the other 4 people do theirs. And that was kind of the etiquette back then. That's how you did it, so that everybody got a little something done, and we would just take turns. And so you'd have the thing start, and everybody go to their contacts, and they'd click on a mission, no idea that it's going to be timed, and then all of a sudden 3 people are saying in team chat, we got to do mine first, it's timed. Like, well, we can't. And we only got 30 minutes to do 3 30-minute missions, so yeah, at least 1 or possibly 2 people are going to be out of luck, and then their missions failed, and they got to go back to their contact, take it again. That kind of thing is incredibly frustrating, and it was utterly unnecessary because they could have just warned you this is a timed mission ahead of time. Sometimes they do now, but in the past they didn't. And one of the fixes they did do, right? They never did the real fixes, which would have been things like having the timer not run while we're logged out and stuff like that. And I don't know what it does now, but certainly while Statesman was in charge, they never did that fix. But one of the things they did do was they like doubled and tripled how much time you have. So I don't think any of them do 30 minutes anymore. Most of them do like an hour or an hour and a half or an hour and 15. Which I guess they figure, in case 2 people get a mission, you should be able to get through them pretty easily, with an hour and 15 minutes. Usually you're well within that time period. But when you have 2 or 3 missions, you're trying to get them all done in 30 minutes, and it's a group. I mean, little missions like this where you only have 1 player, you can maybe do it because the single player missions are, fairly quick. You're just defeating spawns of 2 or 3, right? A lieutenant and a minion, or just 3 minions, and it doesn't take that long to beat up 3 minions. But when you're in these big giant groups and you're fighting, 16, 18, 20 enemies all at once, yes, you have more heroes, and you guys can definitely speed things up by working together, but it definitely gets longer. There are more spawns, they're bigger spawns. Sometimes you have to pull and stuff like that, and pulling takes a long time, right? Whereas something like this, I haven't had to pull at all, right? What do I need to pull for? This is all fine. And so so yeah, it was a very awkward design choice that they made to have the time missions and to have them work the way they worked, which was like without warning and stuff. It was a very awkward design choice, and I feel like they never really got the alchemy of the time missions right. It seems to me like a lot of the time missions have been yanked or turned into not being time missions. Again, I don't remember too much about the Homecoming missions because I haven't played Homecoming in like a year and a half, but certainly on Rebirth, I don't remember getting that many of them. Not as many as it felt like we got when the game launched, man. It felt like you got a time mission. Any session that was hour and a half long where you're playing several missions, one of them was going to be timed. There were just so many of them. And I think what happened is they may have taken a lot of the time missions that were fluff missions out, the ones that aren't part of story arcs, either took them out or made them not be timed or dramatically increased the timer on them. And the only ones you get now, I think, are the ones that were sort of intimately involved in the story arcs, right? Where the timing matters for the story arc. Because you're saving the life of some NPC or something, and you only have 90 minutes to live, and that kind of thing. Alright, we're fighting our first boss. This is Sparkles. So I purposely took a bunch of inspirations, because bosses hit harder than minions, and you can see that for sure. But I think having a defense and having extra damage was really what the doctor ordered, and now this, one of the most useless features. These guys go, down, and then they get these underlings which are weaker than minions, and they're like blue cons, and they have absolutely no threat to you. It's like, I don't know why they bother. At least with like the werewolves and stuff, when the vampires collapse and turn into werewolves, the werewolf is actually kind of a threat, but these guys aren't at all. I would love to sit Statesman down. Back then, I would have loved to sit Statesman down and just get an honest answer on what is the point of those gears, because they seem rather pointless to me. Okay, we do have a dual origin enhancer here for accuracy. So this is interesting. Let's just see what happens if I click upgrade. I have 3 enhancements that will automatically be upgraded to level 9. I need 17,000 influence. No, we're not gonna waste 17,000 influence on that. That's silly. Not at this level. Again, guys, the main reason is you're just look how fast we're gonna hit level 7, right? So 5 minutes and we'll be level 7. It's just not worth it to have enhancers that are only gonna last you for an afternoon of play. It's just not worth it. Okay, there's blue steel. I'm not really going to blue steel here because we haven't leveled up yet, but oh, we could maybe level up on these guys. How many XP do we need? We hover over. We need about 180 XP. And individual minions are about, just basically need to beat up about 10 minions. That's not too bad. Let's go ahead and try to level up here. By the way, I love this theme song of Freedom Plaza. Da-da-da! It's kind of like the City of Heroes theme, right, when you first log into the game. I feel like I remember in the music, I love the City of Heroes music, I feel like I remember somebody saying that they actually used, not open source music, but it was like, there's some CD you could buy from Sony or something that has music that like you can just license the music and then use it, and I guess it doesn't cost that much. And somebody was saying that he'd actually like bought the CD because he liked the City of Heroes music and he was listening to it, and it's basically just like not public domain, but like, when you go to like get a stock photo, it's basically stock music, and you go to get a stock photo and you use it. Same thing, only it's stock music. So it's just interesting that this music that seems so iconic to me is actually stock music. It's kind of cool. Oh, we're not going to fight a Redcon Bone Natty. We should be getting pretty close here to leveling up. We now need about 40 XP, which is just another 3 or 4 of these guys. And then we will be level 7. I think at that point we will wrap it up. We'll sell our enhancements. Got another enhancement, huh? Well, there's a natural one. Okay, so I can show you something with that one. So one thing you can do with enhancements is you can add to them, right? So this is a well, I can't really show it because it's dual origin, but if this were dual origin, I'd be able to show it. Basically, you can take this one, you can add another one to level 6s, it will add to a level 7. And so you can keep your enhancements refreshed a little bit with that. Let me see here. Oh, we could add some damage. There you go. But you can see this recharge has already started to get weaker. It's only doing 15% buff. This is 16%. This is 33%. So they're going to slowly go down as they become more and more yellow, and then eventually red, and so forth. So we're now inches away from our level up, and this guy should put me over the edge. We're going to have to fight another guy too. But that's alright, because we'll level up when we beat this guy, and then it'll be easier. See, he turned to a white con there because we leveled up. And now we're going to hit super easily, do a lot of damage, and then we can take to the sky and come over here and sell all of our unnecessary enhancers. Here we go. That's what I want to do. We now have 31,000 influence. Remember, we started with 0, obviously, and we had 6 after 1 episode, so we now have 31,000. We come to our buddy Blue Steel. We train up to the next level, and we're going to get, again, even slotting. That's what I like to do. And now Shauna Stockwell will allow me to talk to her. So I'm going to head over to the train station, which is where Shauna Stockwell is, and we're now going to use her as our contact. Should be safe here. There's usually not enemies. And so in the next episode, we'll start the, whatever it's called, the Superidine Ring, or whatever it is, story arc that Shauna Stockwell can put you on, and you'll see the blue text and how all of that works in the next episode. I hope you guys have enjoyed. Until next time, I am Scrapperlock, and this has been City of Heroes.